So the answer is a lot more than we think. This is her tree, and it's actually a very interesting family tree. I've not only set it up to show you how each monarch from Elizabeth up to Henry VIII is related to their spouse, but also it doubles in that it shows how Elizabeth is connected to these very famous monarchs like Henry VIII, King George, Elizabeth I, and even Anne Boleyn. So stay tuned. If you're new to my channel, welcome. Here on Mortal Faces, I take portraits and transform them to see how individuals we read about might have looked in real life. And I also detangle some inbred family trees like in this video. So let's get started. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more historical recreations. And let me know in the comments who you'd like to see in real life. We are going to start off with George I. George I was the first British monarch of the House of Hanover. Before that, we had the House of Stuart, which was the Scottish line, and before that, the Tudor dynasty, which was Elizabeth I and Henry VIII. We're going to see them later on, but let's first talk about George I. The time period is the late 1600s and the early 1700s. Louis XIV of France, the Sun King, just started upgrading his palace of Versailles. In England, though, we have the newlyweds George I and his wife Sophia Dorothy of Celle, and they are first cousins. Their fathers were brothers and share the same grandfather. George got the English throne because his mother's mom was Elizabeth Stuart, the daughter to King James VI of Scotland and First of England. Through Elizabeth Stuart's brother Charles, his son was James II of the Glorious Revolution, and his daughter was the famous Queen Anne. The Glorious Revolution overthrew the Catholic James II and replaced the crown with his Protestant daughters Mary and then Anne. Anne died childless, so the throne went to the next Protestant member, which was her great-aunt Elizabeth Stuart's line. It was her youngest Protestant daughter Sophia who was the most direct Protestant heir because everyone above her, including her siblings and cousins, were Roman Catholic. Sophia married Ernest Augustus, Elector of Hanover, and their son became King George I of England. A result of the Glorious Revolution, all the monarchs of the British throne continued to be Protestant. They had King George II. George II married a cousin, Caroline of Ansbach. George and Caroline share the same ancestor, George through 6 generations up and Caroline through 5 generations up. Their common ancestor is Joachim Ernest, Prince of Anhalt, in the mid-1500s. George II and Caroline are considered fourth cousins once removed. They had 3 relevant kids to this tree: Frederick, Prince of Wales, Princess Mary, and Princess Louise of Great Britain. We will see the princesses Mary and Louise later on. Frederick predeceased his father, but his marriage to Princess Augusta of Saxe-Gotha produced the next king, George III. The time period of George III is, think about Marie Antoinette and Versailles. It incorporates the late 1700s. George III married the famous Queen Charlotte of Mecklenburg-Strelitz. We know her as the queen from Netflix's Bridgerton and of my other video recreating her controversial family tree and how she might have looked in real life. George and Charlotte are actually related through both their maternal grandfather's sides. Their great-grandparents were brothers and so share the same great-great-grandparent. They are third cousins. Their great-great-grandfather was Ernest I, Duke of Saxe-Gotha. He had 18 kids. Think about that, 18. And through 3 of these 18 kids, John Ernest IV, Frederick I, and Ernest, we have, as I've mentioned, King George III through Frederick, Queen Charlotte through Ernest. Then their son Prince Edward married Princess Victoria, a 4th cousin through John Ernest IV. Then Princess Victoria and Prince Edward had Queen Victoria. Queen Victoria, the time frame is the 1800s, think of hoop skirts, petticoats, and bustles, married her first cousin, Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. Their parents are brother and sister, which makes them a first cousin. And secondly, their parents are commonly related to the son, John Ernest IV. As a side note, Prince Albert's mother is also directly related to the common ancestor Ernest I, Duke of Saxe-Gotha, through his son Frederick I, which means Prince Albert's parents are 4th cousins once removed as well. Then Albert and Queen Victoria had the party king Edward VII, and his time frame, think of Titanic, the early 1900s. He married Alexandra of Denmark, his fourth cousin twice over. Edward's great-great-great-grandfather was King George II, and he was Alexandra's great-great-great-grandfather too, through her mother and father's sides. They had George V. The time period of George V is, think of World War I. George V was Elizabeth II's grandfather, and he married Mary of Teck. Mary of Teck came from a really royal family tree. It goes all the way up to Henry II of England in the 1100s, and his son King John of the Robin Hood story. Also the Austrian royal families, the Habsburgs, the German royal families. She has common ancestry to Queen Charlotte and separately her husband George III, and even Anne of Cleves, Henry VIII's fourth wife. It's really illustrious. However, she is closely related to her husband George V through George III. Her maternal grandfather was the seventh son to George III, and her husband's paternal great-grandfather was the fourth son of George III. In other words, Queen Victoria's father's brother's line creates Mary of Teck. They are second cousins once removed. You can pause the video to see that through her father's side, she is also related to George II and George I. And from her mother's side, she is related to George II too. You'll also notice a lot of the spouses her ancestors married were related to the same Bavarian, Austrian, German, and Habsburg royal families, so as I've mentioned, she's a really intense woman. Together they have George VI, who was Elizabeth II's father. George VI got the throne from his older brother Edward's abdication to Wallace Simpson. George VI's time frame is World War II. George VI married Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, also known as the Queen Mother. The Queen Mother, in comparison to Mary of Teck, had a more direct, noble line, rather than a maze of royals. Her father's line was pretty linear, and it really doesn't get tangled up until the 1600s, about 10 generations up with Elizabeth Butler, Duchess of Ormond's ancestry. They married cousins. However, it was her mother's side, born Cecilia Cavendish Bentinck, that connects this family circle. Cecilia's paternal grandfather was the third son of a duke, and his mom was Dorothy Bentinck, Duchess of Portland. She was the daughter of the fourth Duke and Duchess of Devonshire. Through the Duke, his line goes all the way up to Henry Howard, the son of Thomas Howard, 3rd Duke of Norfolk. His father was the 2nd Duke of Norfolk, also named Thomas. The 2nd Duke had 3 kids: Elizabeth Howard, Anne Boleyn's mother, Edmund Howard, Catherine Howard's father, and Thomas Howard, Henry Howard's father. Henry, Catherine, and Anne were all first cousins. On the other side, the Duchess of Devonshire's family tree goes directly up to Lettice Knollys. Lettice was the granddaughter of Mary Boleyn, Anne Boleyn's sister. So through the lines of Henry Howard and his first cousin Mary Boleyn, we can create the Duke and Duchess of Devonshire. What's interesting is that Princess Diana's ancestor is George John, the 2nd Earl Spencer. George John's sister was Georgina, who through marriage became the 5th Duchess of Devonshire, the famous one that Keira Knightley played. So Georgina and George John's father was the same guy, the 1st Earl Spencer. And it's the 1st Earl Spencer's line that connects into the 4th Duchess of Devonshire's line, which goes up to Mary Boleyn. So Georgina, the Duchess of Devonshire, Princess Diana, and Queen Elizabeth's maternal grandmother Cecilia are all related to Mary Boleyn and ultimately Thomas Howard, the 2nd Duke of Norfolk, in the 14 and 1500s. However, this is about the Queen Mother and her relation to her husband. Paternally, through the 4th Duke of Devonshire up to Henry Howard, his mother was Elizabeth Stafford, and through Elizabeth's line we have Joan Beaufort. Joan's brother was John Beaufort, the 1st Earl of Somerset. Their father was the famous John of Gaunt, whose father was King Edward III of England. King Edward's children branched off into the houses of York and Lancaster, which created the War of the Roses in the 1400s. It was through John of Gaunt, a Lancaster, that we have Henry VII's claim to the throne, because Henry VII's mother was the famous Lancaster Lady Margaret Beaufort, the granddaughter to John Beaufort, the first Earl of Somerset. Basically, they took their claim to the throne and ended the War of the Roses by having her son marry his fourth cousin, a York, combining the two factions back into one. She put her son Henry VII onto the throne, beginning the Tudor dynasty. From this, we have Henry VIII, who married Anne Boleyn and Catherine Howard. Yes, he is related to Anne and Catherine. Through the paternal lines, they are commonly related to Henry III of England in the 1200s, so 9 and 10 generations up. A pro tidbit, Anne and Catherine's great-grandfather branches off to the Earl of Ormond, and that goes straight down to the Queen Mother's father. So the Queen Mother is paternally and maternally related to the Boleyns and Henry III as well. Henry VIII's line, however, goes extinct with Elizabeth I. It's his sister Margaret Tudor's line that connects us to George I. Margaret married the King of Scotland, James IV, her third cousin. They had James V of Scotland, and he had Mary Queen of Scots. Mary Queen of Scots was Elizabeth I's second cousin once removed. They share the same ancestor, Henry VII, the first Tudor king. Mary Queen of Scots has James VI of Scotland and first of England, who has Charles I of England, who has James II of the Glorious Revolution. Remember from the beginning of the video. So we are going in a circle. He had Queen Anne. Queen Anne died childless, so the throne went to her Protestant great-aunt Elizabeth Stuart, whose Protestant daughter Sophia married Ernest Augustus, Elector of Hanover, and together they had King George I. And through his line all the way down, we have Queen Elizabeth II, who married Prince Philip, her third cousin through Queen Victoria. They are her great-great-grandchildren. They are also second cousins once removed through their Denmark lines. Elizabeth's great-grandfather was King Edward VII, who married Alexandra of Denmark. Her father was Christian IX of Denmark. Christian IX was Prince Philip's paternal great-grandfather, making them second cousins once removed as well. Finally, to complete the story, what about Charles and Lady Diana? Well, Charles and the late Princess Diana both descended from James VI of Scotland and I of England. As mentioned, James had two kids that are relevant, Charles I and Elizabeth Stuart. Through Charles I, we have Charles II and his illegitimate child, Henry Fitzroy, which goes straight down to Diana. On the other hand, Elizabeth Stuart goes to Prince Charles. And how related are Prince William and Kate Middleton? Well, her great-great-grandmother, Frances Elizabeth Greenhow, was the 10th great-granddaughter of Sir William Gascoigne, a Yorkshire knight who died in 1487. He married Lady Margaret Percy, the fourth and youngest daughter of Henry Percy, Earl of Northumberland. The Earl descended from King Edward III through both his parents, and this makes William and Kate 14th cousins once removed through his mother, and 15th cousins through his father. And that brings us to the end of this video. What have we learned from this? Well, basically, everyone from Elizabeth's ancestry pretty much is related to their spouse. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you're interested in more inbred family trees, I have more on my channel. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more historical recreations. It's the best way to support me. And let me know in the comments who you'd like to see in real life, and I will see you in the next one.